So hi everyone. Super happy to be here today to talk to you about what I call M&A Blindspots. Basically, I want to sort of share the experience that I had when I and my three other partners sold our business. And please feel free to interrupt, raise your hand if Isabella can see that. If you'd like to either write your question in the chat, I'm happy to take questions in between, no problem. So now I need to, there we go. So I think from what I saw, quite a few of you know who I am, but just to maybe give those who don't a little insight into me. So my name is Kim Harris. And I was one of the managing partners of Textum Forum in Berlin, Germany for, 26 years. We founded the company in 1996 and we sold in 2019, sorry. And in the process of, before we sold, we obviously went through a lot of iterations of what it means to sell your business, which is one of the things that I want to talk to you about today as well. So just a little bit about my history of selling. So we sold in 2019. We were very happy with the way the process went in 2019. When we sold, I moved to London. I was actually living in the UK at the time, and I moved to London to study interior design, which has been something I've always wanted to do, sort of explore the creative side of myself. I moved back to Berlin in 2020 when just before COVID hit, and obviously my focus was on hospitality, so I wasn't really a very didn't have much work in interior design, working in bars and restaurants and hotels during the 2 years of COVID in Germany. What I did do during that time was study to be a coach. And I got my certification as a coach, and I really, really enjoy the work that I'm doing now. So all of this to say that selling my business in 2019 allowed me to really sort of do the things that I'd always wanted to do in my life. So what I wanted to start with, just to give you an idea of sort of the maturity of what I went through, or what we went through as a company when we were selling. So we founded the company in 1996, and we said, in 10 years, we're going to sell. We're going to get millions for the company in 10 years. We started as an LSP working for other LSPs. By 2006, when we were thinking about selling, I think we had maybe one major large software company that we were working for, and quite a few companies that we were working for in Germany, from German into other languages. Needless to say, however, our revenue was split 60-40 basically, and 60% of that was coming from other LSPs. So not that we tried to sell at the time, but when we did go into the process shortly thereafter, we realized that you can't be working for other LSPs if you want to sell your business. So that's one thing, and that's one thing that I think quite a few people don't understand, especially smaller LSPs, is the value of their company, which is something we might talk about later. 2010, we kind of went through this phase of partnerships, which is kind of like merging without losing your identity within the merger, right? There were two iterations of that. Neither of them worked for the same reasons. It's always, it's about culture. It's about the wants and needs of everyone who's involved in this. And acquisition might be a little bit different because you have someone who's buying and someone who's selling. When you're looking at mergers, you've got companies who are coming together, and you need to be able to find that fit in a lot of ways, including management, which is most often the problem, including, how to divide financial burden as well as profit. So needless to say, those didn't work out. 2017 was an interesting experiment for us because it was a time when we had a lot of emotional things going on between the four partners. A lot of you know that that Thomas Senf and I were together, and we split up that year. So it was, for me, it was like I really wanted to sell the company. Like I just wanted to get out. I didn't want to have anything to do with it anymore. And we had a company that was interested in buying us. This is why I call it the desperation phase, because we went really far in this process, way too far in the process of getting into the due diligence, the contracts. We spent so much time on this, only to discover just before signing that it wasn't the right fit for us, and we were very afraid, because of some of the conditions in the contract, that we might not see the money that we wanted. So that was kind of an eye-opener for us going into 2019. We decided to work with a consultant to sell the business, which was a good move for us. It's not necessarily a necessary move for everybody, but it was a very good move for us. And we knew from what had happened in 2017 what we wanted and what we didn't want it. It would have been much better for us to have done that before going into 2017, which is basically the point of my presentation today, is to talk about what you should be doing before you even have someone interested in buying your company. So McKinsey and Harvard Business Review both talk about failure when it comes to mergers and acquisitions. And I think it is an important point to make. 70 to 90% of all mergers fail. The majority of those fail within the first year. What does failure mean? It means that the buying company tries to off-ramp the company that they bought, realizing that it's not the right fit for a variety of reasons, meaning that the buying company is not making the profit or diversifying the way that they had anticipated being able to do with acquiring these businesses. In 2022, worldwide, 55,000 mergers and acquisitions were completed. And the number one reason for mergers and acquisitions to fail is lack of alignment, lack of cultural fit. And that's from both the buyer side and the seller side. The seller will see a merger or an acquisition as a fail if they are not getting out of it what they anticipate getting out of it as well. So this is why it's really important for both sides, both the buyers and the sellers, to make sure that the cultural fit is aligned, that everything that they want to get out of this merger and acquisition is actually aligned with each other. So this is what Harvard Business Review says about culture. Culture is like the wind. It is invisible, yet its effects can be seen and felt. And this was one of the things in 2017 that we had discovered when we were trying to sell our business. We had an interest from another LSP. They had some PE and they were looking to expand. It was an American company. And what we discovered during the process was that they were not aligned with our values. And our values were retaining our staff, working closely with our clients during the acquisition, maintaining a brand within the group, because of certain things that are just, you know, part of the German culture. When you are working for, which we were at the time, working for a lot of companies in Germany that were still run by the families who founded them, they see you as part of the family. And so taking away that feeling from them was something that was very concerning to us, which was part of what happened with this process, was that we discovered that they were not interested in maintaining good relationships with our clients. They wanted the clients, but they also wanted to change the branding. And we decided that that wasn't going to work for us. And the one thing I need to emphasize here is that I don't talk about culture only to make us feel better when we sell, that, you know, everything is hunky-dory. When you are selling your company, and if things like culture and management are not aligned with what you have been doing in your company since before selling, you risk losing customers, you risk losing team members, you risk losing motivation of people who work for you, and that means you risk potentially fulfilling your earnout, right? Because most of the time when you sell, in order to maximize how much you can sell for, you have certain conditions in your contract, including things like earnouts. And these earnouts last for anywhere between a year, 2 or 3 years, depending on how much money we're talking about. When you are in the process of rebranding, because that is what the purchasing company wants, when you're in that process, you risk, of course, losing clients and losing team members, and therefore losing part of your earnout. And this is something that you need to really pay attention to. Culture it's invisible, but it is so felt in everything that you do around this whole process and what happens after you sell. So this is why it's important to consider this before you sell, and to consider it even before you have someone that you would like to sell to. What culture and what cultural fit is what you want for your company, so that you've got that in mind before you're actually even engaging in any sort of negotiations. So what drives a sale? And when I say this mostly from a very emotional, very sort of personal perspective. There are good things that drive sales, and there are, you know, some things that we do out of fear, out of needs, that are not coming from a place of alignment within ourselves as to what it is that we actually want to get out of this. And so, you know, ideally, what drives a sale is long-term planning. You have an exit strategy. You plan to work with this 3 to 5 years. You know exactly what it is that you want. You know what sort of an EBIT you need to achieve in order to be able to achieve the type of sale that you would like, the financial, the money that's coming out of the sale, as well as the stability within your team, the stability within clients, and moving forward technology and that kind of stuff. So when we sold the last time, well, when we went into the process of negotiation the last time, we had someone come in and actually help us get the company into a position that would allow us to sell the company for what we felt that it was worth. And that was Hans Fenstermacher, some of you know, who passed recently. Brilliant human being who came in, and he basically did, with us, put together a strategy, a 3-year strategy for us to grow our business and have a profit, which we didn't have before, to turn the company around, and to understand what was necessary in order to be able to do that was so important. And I don't just mean having the numbers, but how to get them and what's important in that process and how you get there. It's all about business growth. It's all about not having this fear, which I'll come to next, of losing people, or fear of missing out, or whatever those fears are that stop you from doing these things. So long-term planning is the ideal scenario. It is super helpful. You don't need to plan for 3 to 5 years for 3 to 5 years. You just need to have someone come in to help you understand, or not someone, but you need to understand what it is that you need in order to be able to get there. And that is the being informed part, which we'll talk about later. Fear. This is one of the reasons why you should not sell. If you are afraid of missing out, if you are, you have this company and you think all of these mergers and acquisitions are happening in the industry, or whatever industry you're in our industry, this one, obviously, it happens all the time. And this fear, this sense of undefined urgency to sell, this fear of failure, any sort of fear around selling, I need to do this now, I have to have this now, because are ultimately going to deprive you of, first of all, selling for a good price, and second of all, living your best life once you've sold. If you do anything out of fear, the results are not going to be optimal for you from a personal standpoint. So selling out of fear, which a lot of people do or attempt, is also when you are not aware of the long-term planning and what you need to do in order to be able to put long-term planning into place. The other one is money. Obviously, you feel this need to sell. Maybe because you want to retire, you want to have another life, you are getting tired of running a lifestyle business that isn't super profitable, or someone comes in and offers you a lot of money for your company. Now, in most cases, I would say, sure, why not? But then if that's the case, then get out sooner rather than later. Don't go for an earn out. Make sure that if you're promised pie in the sky, you're getting your pie, and you can take off. Otherwise, make sure you do your due diligence in terms of who it is you're selling to, what the contract looks like, what other things you're agreeing to, like rebranding, that might have an influence on your earnout. The last one is comfort zone, and this is the one I think is probably sort of combines all of these things, all of the last two at least. This is when you feel like you're stagnating, right? You have like this, it's a good company and everything, but you're not growing. You've got all this new technology coming in, like right now, you've got, AI everywhere. Nobody knows really how to implement it. When we were selling our business, it was all around MT, and NMT models and all sorts of things that had to do with machine translation. And it's a revolving aspect of any business, particularly ours, because it's become quite important. But if you're not willing to sort of push yourself out of your comfort zone and understand why it's necessary to grow your business, what growing your business entails in terms of technology, what business growth entails in terms of pushing the limits on your margins, and working with your teams in a way that allows you to grow the business, then that's going to be a hindrance. And what's going to happen is if you do that, you're not going to get the best value for money when you sell your company, and you're not going to be happy with yourself when you do sell. And there'll be a lot of lack of motivation and people really not happy with what's going on, especially if when you do it for this reason, a company is coming in that's going to basically kind of move over you like a wave and just sort of drown everything else that you've done because you're staying in your comfort zone. So I think the biggest question that you need to be asking yourself before you do anything else when you're thinking about selling is understanding your why. Simon Sinek talks about this a lot, obviously, and what I'm talking about here is knowing your personal why. It's important to understand the motivation that you have for selling your business. If you understand that motivation and you are aligned with that motivation, everything else will be easier. Not going to be easy, but it will be easier. Like the need to grow your business, or the need to move away from other LSPs, or the need to expand with technology if that's where you're going. The personal side of selling is the most important. You need to understand not only why you want to go through this process, but what is driving you to want to do this? What are your ultimate goals? What do you want to do when you're done? Is there anything in particular you think about doing? How do you want to spend that year or two that you need to stay in the company? What does that look like for you when you sell? Because this is another aspect that a lot of people don't take as seriously as they should, which is you need to make sure that you understand completely that in most cases you will still be a part of the company you sell in order to be able to maximize your earnout. This is how most of the sales go. Sometimes you can sell and leave the company right away, but generally you will get less money if you do that, because the continuity is something that a lot of buyers, especially if they're PE and especially if they are larger LSPs who don't want to lose the clients and the team. So this is the reason why knowing your why is the first thing that you need to understand. And there are lots of questions around this that are important. It's why am I selling, or why am I not expanding my business? What is it that is driving me to want to get out of my business? And the answers that you give yourself for these questions should be positive for you and not negative. If the answer to the question is, when you say, why am I doing this? The answer is because my business isn't doing well and I need to get out because I don't know what else to do. That will be a very frustrating process. So we went through this 3 times. The first time we went through this, we had a company come to us and say, hey, we're really interested. We want to expand it was a French company. They wanted to expand their business to Germany. And we were like, oh, really cool. And this was like shortly after the 10 years. We weren't making money. We didn't have a profit, but we had a lifestyle business. For us, it was fine. The way that we were running it was, it wasn't like we were doing well. We were just able to sort of live from the business and treat our team well as well. So I don't think we were really seriously considering selling. But I also don't think we really understood what it meant to sell. And so I spent the good part of 6 months with this company, not understanding anything about what it is that they wanted from me and what their questions were, and knew nothing about what due diligence even meant. We were just kind of, we were sort of in the curious phase of, well, let's see what they offer us. And of course, the offer was horrible. And it was the reason why I went through this, or we went through this for 6 months, was because we didn't actually have a why, because we weren't actually at a point where we seriously were considering selling, and our business wasn't worth anything to sell. This is, I think, a point that a lot of small companies don't understand when they are looking at selling, is that your value is dependent on many factors that we as the business owners don't necessarily take into consideration or think about when we are in the process. For example, having an EBIT that is more than 5%, or having, a client base, if you are selling to a larger LSP or even PE that is working with other LSPs or has other LSPs under its umbrella, just like T-Works, who bought us, then you can't have 80% of your business coming from other LSPs because it's competition. So these are the types of things that you need to be looking at. But unless you know your why, you can't actually move into looking at some of these other questions. Because if you don't have a reason or a purpose, a positive purpose to be selling, you're not going to put the effort in to do the things that are necessary when you need to get to that point. So this is my last slide. Be informed. And when I say that, I mean before you even consider entertaining an offer or going into discussions with any company about selling your business, or even for those who are looking at buying other companies, you need to do the work beforehand so that when you go into the process, you are informed and you're not going to waste your time with a company that is not a good fit for you. And so when I talk about these things, personal readiness, this is, the know your why, understanding the reason why you're doing these things, your personal goals. What is it you want to achieve? What is it you want to do with your life when you're done? What is it you want, how you want to see things when you're done? The next one is, of course, know and understand the process. This is super important, and a lot of people don't know this, and we didn't. We had no clue. The first time with the French company, we had no idea what to expect, none whatsoever. And while it was an interesting journey going through this, it was unnecessary. Had I done the research and known what to expect from the process, I would never have wasted my time getting an offer that was such a low offer, and it was justifiably low. We were, of course, super upset and insulted, but at the end of the day, our company just wasn't worth what we thought it was worth. And that, I think, is why it's super important to know and understand the process before you start getting into the process. There are lots of ways to inform yourself. There are lots of things that you can do around just sort of having conversations with yourself, with your partners, with your loved ones, to be ready for it, and then to get into understanding the process, doing your research, what that means, asking people questions, going to events. I mean, Gala is having a whole sort of section in Sevilla this conference on M&A, and that's, those are the types of things that would be if you are going to be interested in selling your business within the next 12 to 24 months, this is something that you need to be doing, understanding the process, looking at contracts, understanding what things can be in contracts, understanding what it is that you need to be aware of, like earnouts, for example, or the other ways of payment if they're looking at giving you stock. These are all the things that you need to know about before you start looking at the due diligence, and making sure that these are okay with you. So the next one is be honest about alignment, be honest about alignment, cultural and otherwise. So when I talk about cultural fit, it's not just that people get along. It is really about the type of corporate culture you have and whether or not that is going to be important for you moving forward, especially if you are still tied to the merger or the acquisition for a year to 2 years by means of your earnout, right? This is why this is important. How is management going to be run? How do you want management to be run in your company while you are still there? This is something you need to know and think about before you go into the process. How do you want to be able to have an influence on your company? Are you okay with rebranding immediately? This was part of the problem that we had in 2017 was the company wanted to rebrand within the first 4 months of buying our company. And they also wanted to with some of the other companies that they had been buying, they wanted to move into one of our biggest clients with those companies. And we knew that that would mean that the client would take some work away from us because they didn't like to put too many eggs in one basket. So that was going to have a huge influence on the amount of revenue that the company generated, the profit, the EBIT. And that's why this was just not aligned with us, right? So this is something that you really need to know, and you really need to be honest about it. You need to be honest with yourself about that. Is this a good fit for, the next 12 to 24 months? Is this a good fit for my team, if that's important to you? And what does it mean for me in the future? And the last point I want to make, which was a lesson that I learned by doing, basically, is not to be afraid to say no. And we have issues all the time with saying no, right? Nobody wants to say no. And this starts with our teams. When our teams come to us and they want something and we can't say no, we can't put our foot down, we can't express what it is that we want or what I don't want to say expect, because I'm not a fan of expectations, but agreements that you make with people and that these agreements are fulfilled, right? And when you are going into any sort of contractual, something that's going to affect you for the rest of your life, affect your team for the rest of your life, and you know what it is that you want because you've studied yourself, because you've done your research, because you've done your homework, you understand the process. If something inside you is telling you to say no, say no. You are not going to miss out. There will be other opportunities and they will be better. And it's better to say no than to regret making the wrong move for yourself. So that's basically it for my presentation.